In the United States, there's a couple of factors which have affected the decline in migrant inflows to the United States. First of all, in terms of migration flows, we have to distinguish between permanent migration that is going through legal channels, which is essentially family migration, and which has remained broadly constant, and irregular migration, which is for employment, and which has declined a lot with the crisis due to a number of factors. First of all, of course, the downturn of the economy, so there's less demand for that type of labor, so fewer immigrants are coming for employment. Also, of course, there's been increased enforcement, and also the situation in some of the origin countries also has improved relative to what they can expect in the United States.
Let me ask you about OECD countries and this economy, which, as you well know, has been kind of in the dumps for a while. How has that impacted immigrants?
Well, immigrants have suffered more from the downturn than the native-born. That's due to a number of factors. First of all, because they have been highly concentrated in sectors which are hardest hit by the crisis, such as construction and a number of service sectors which are very much linked with the business cycle. And also, quite often, immigrants have been in less stable employment situations. They have had perhaps less tenure, less experience. So they're among the most vulnerable in the downturn, and they were among the first to lose their jobs. On the other hand, we also see, and that is an experience which we have seen in past crises, that quite often also immigrants particularly benefit from an upswing. So they are the immigrant employment situation is much more cyclical than that of the native-born, precisely because of the kind of jobs which are the first to disappear are also quite often the first to reappear when the economy picks up.
One of the things you hear in this country, and I want to kind of touch on one of the points you were making, one of the things you hear in the United States is that immigrants are stealing jobs from other people. When there is an economic downturn, in many respects, immigrants are seen in a negative light by some citizens. Can you talk a little bit about that and your findings in the report? Did you see much of that?
Well, we have not specifically looked at the issue of public opinion in this particular report, but general, of course, there's a real risk, of course, that immigrants, that the public opinion turns negative in a downturn against immigrants, but that's not necessarily the case. If you look, for example, at the situation in Spain, a country which has been very, very hard hit by the crisis, which had very large migration inflows, one of the largest increases which we've seen in the OECD over the past decade, and where immigrants are very hard hit also by the crisis. But you don't really have a lot of negative discourse against immigrants. So it's not necessarily the case that the public discourse has to turn negative against immigrants in the crisis. And it's important also to highlight the facts that there's very little evidence that immigrants would crowd out native-born. In fact, quite often they create additional employment for the native-born.
Thomas Liebig joining us from Paris. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you.